Hello everybody, this is a part of a series of applied neuroanatomy, and today we are going to discuss the anatomy of the thalamus. Before discussing the anatomy of the thalamus, we have to clarify some nomenclature related to the thalamic region. When we talk about the thalamus, we mean it is like an egg at the junction of the brainstem with the brain. The metathalamus is the medial and lateral geniculate bodies. The epithalamus is the pineal gland and habenular nuclei. The subthalamus consists of three lemnisci, the medial, the spinal, and the trigeminal lemnisci, and the subthalamic nucleus. The hypothalamus is present below and anterior to the thalamus. This is the picture of the thalamus present at the junction of the midbrain with the brainstem. Midbrain and the brain. Here is an egg, which is the thalamus. This is another view showing the medulla, the pons, the midbrain, and above the midbrain lies the thalamus. This is a superior view of the thalamus, showing that it forms part of the floor of the body of the lateral ventricle and the lateral wall of the third ventricle. And we have the two thalami, we have right and left thalami, connected together by interthalamic adhesions or massa intermedia. And above the thalamus, at the roof of the thalamus posteriorly, lies the pineal gland and the habenullar nuclei. Lateral to the thalamus, there is a furrow where is present the thalamus striate vein, where it unites with the septal vein at the foramen of Monroe, forming the venous angle, called the venous angle, forming the internal cerebral vein running on the roof of the thalamus. This is another view showing the roof of the thalamus, and there is a vein here which is called the superior layer of tela choroidae. There is the inferior layer of tela choroidae lining the thalamus, extending to the midbrain, and the superior layer of tela choroidae above it and lining the fornices, extending to the splenium of the corpus callosum. Between the two layers of the tela choroidae, there is space at the roof of the thalamus called the cisterna villa interpositus, and this space contains the internal cerebral veins, which, as we said before, are formed by the junction of the thalamus striate and the septal vein, and the medial posterior choroidal arteries, which supply the medial and superior part of the thalamus. This is a view of the roof of the thalamus, which is the body of the lateral ventricle, and here is the choroid plexus in the lateral ventricle. Here is the right and left thalami, the cavity in between is the third ventricle, and here is the choroid plexus in the roof of the third ventricle. The blood supply of the thalamus is mainly from perforators from the posterior communicating artery, what we call the tuberothalamic artery, as well as perforators from the P1 and P2 branches of the posterior cerebral artery, the P1 between the basilar and the posterior communicating, and the P2 is distal to the posterior communicating artery. The nuclei of the thalamus, if you look to the thalamus, you will find that it is divided by a Y-shaped structure called the internal medullary lamina into an anterior part, a lateral part, a medial part, and the most medial of the medial part is called the median part near the midline. Our main concern will be about the anterior part and the lateral part. The anterior part contains the anterior nucleus of the thalamus, and the lateral part is further subdivided into an upper and a lower part and a posterior part. The upper part contains two nuclei, the lateral dorsal and the lateral posterior. And the ventral part contains the anterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus, the lateral ventral nucleus of the thalamus, and the posterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus, which is further subdivided into the intermediate nucleus of the thalamus, the posteromedial ventral nucleus of the thalamus, the posterolateral ventral nucleus of the thalamus, and the pulvinar. This is another view of the thalamus. We change the direction. So here is posterior, the pulvinar. Here is the anterior nucleus of the thalamus. And here is the lateral part of the thalamus, which is our main concern, divided into the dorsal, the lateral dorsal, and the lateral posterior, and the ventral part, anterior ventral, lateral ventral, and posterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus. The most important nuclei of the thalamus are 5. You don't have to remember all the nuclei because these have neurosurgical applications and because these are involved in very important circuits. So actually what you have to know is 5 nuclei only. One is for the emotions, which is the anterior nucleus of the thalamus, and 2 related to motor connections, which is the anterior ventral connected with the cerebellum and the lateral ventral, which is connected to the extrapyramidal system. And the sensations, we have 2 for the sensation, the posteromedial ventral nucleus of the thalamus and the posterolateral ventral nucleus of the thalamus, the posteromedial carrying sensation from the face and the posterolateral carrying sensation from the body. So 1 for the emotion, 2 for motor connections, and 2 for the sensations. The one with the emotions is the anterior nucleus of the thalamus, what we call the circle of Papez. And this is James Papez, who discovered this circuit in 1937. The circuit of Papez is not that complicated. It is a very simple circuit. You start by the cingulate gyrus on the medial surface of the cerebral hemisphere, which contains a structure called the cingulum. Then the cingulum finds its way and takes impulses to the parahippocampal gyrus, which is the gyrus medial to the hippocampus and the entorhinal cortex. And then from the parahippocampal gyrus, it goes to the hippocampus, and you all know that the hippocampus sends the fimbria of the fornix, and the fornix is a structure on the roof of the thalamus reaching the mammillary bodies, and through the mammillothalamic tracts it reaches the anterior thalamic nucleus of the thalamus, and through the thalamocortical fibers it reaches the cingulate gyrus again. So we have a gyrus outside the cingulate and the structure inside, which is the cingulum. We have a gyrus outside, which is the parahippocampal, and the structure inside, which is the hippocampus. And from the hippocampus, the fornix to mammillary bodies, mammillothalamic, anterior thalamic nucleus, thalamocortical fibers. This is very important in psychosurgery. Sometimes you do lesions in the cingulate gyrus to treat cases of aggression or severe depression or severe anxiety. This is a view of the circle of Papez live. This is the cingulate cortex, and deep to the cingulate cortex there is the cingulum, as we said, and then the cingulum carries impulses to the parahippocampal gyrus and hippocampus, and from the hippocampus the fornix will rise and continue on the surface of the thalamus, reaching the mammillary bodies, and from the mammillary bodies there is the mammillothalamic tract, from the mammillary body to the thalamus, which is the anterior nucleus of the thalamus, through the thalamo-cingulate tract, and then to the cingulate cortex. So this was the first important nucleus of the thalamus. The second important nucleus of the thalamus is the anterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus, which is involved with the cerebellum. You should remember by heart this connection: dentato, rubro, thalamo, fronto, ponto, cerebellar pathway. It's very important to learn it by heart, and you'll see the details later. So it is dentato, rubro, thalamo, fronto, ponto, cerebellar pathway. If we talk about dentato, we talk about the dentate nucleus. Rubro is the red nucleus. Thalamo is the anterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus. Fronto is the premotor area, and extrapyramidal area, ponto to the pons, and then cerebellar pathway. This is to see how does it go. We said dentato, which is the dentate nucleus, it crosses to the opposite side, and take very good care because it crosses to the opposite side and sends to the red nucleus of the midbrain, other red nucleus of the midbrain, dentato rubro. Then from the red nucleus of the midbrain, the impulses leave to the thalamus. Which part of the thalamus? As we said before, the anterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus, dentato rubro thalamo, and then from the thalamo to the frontal pathway up, and then again from the fronto, it goes back again to the pons on the ipsilateral side, ponto, and then from the pons it goes through the middle cerebellar peduncle to the cerebellum, fronto ponto, cerebellar pathway on the surface of the cerebellum, what we call the Purkinje fibers, and then from the Purkinje fibers again to the dentate nucleus. So again, dentato, rubro, thalamo, anterior ventral nucleus of thalamus, fronto, ponto, cerebellar pathway, and there is another crossing. When we talk from the ponto cerebellar pathway to the other side. So when we have double crossing, one from the dentate to the red nucleus of the other side, and one from the pontine nuclei to the cerebellum of the other side, when you have double crossing, a lesion in the cerebellum produces ipsilateral ataxia, ipsilateral dysmetria, ipsilateral affection, because there is double crossing. Here is one crossing, and here is the other crossing. The second nucleus involved in motor function of the thalamus is the lateral ventral nucleus of the thalamus, and this is a very important nucleus because this is one of the sites when we do the lesions to treat tremors in case of Parkinsonism. So it is connected to the lentiform nucleus. When we talk about the lentiform nucleus, you should take into consideration what we are going to tell you, and this will be more explained when you talk about the extrapyramidal system. Please consider the putamen and the caudate nucleus as one mass, one function. And then there is something called the globus pallidus externus, and then called the globus pallidus internus. The globus pallidus externus, it is external. It sends impulses externally to the subthalamic nucleus, while the globus pallidus internus is involved in a circuit. Where is it the circuit? From the caudate and putamen to the globus pallidus internus, to the lateral ventral nucleus of the thalamus, to the premotor cortex, the extrapyramidal cortex, and again from the premotor cortex and the supplementary motor area going back to the putamen. Putamen, globus pallidus internus, and globus pallidus externus. Externus, as we said, sending impulses to the subthalamus, internus forming the circuit to the lateral ventral nucleus of the thalamus, which is our concern here, then going to the supplementary motor area, the premotor area, the extrapyramidal area, the premotor cortex, and it goes back again to the putamen, and the circuit continues. The third important nucleus is the posterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus. When we talk about this, we talk about the sensations. The thalamus is the secretary of the brain. The brain is the big boss. It is concerned with many complex functions. It is not having much time to receive sensations from the body. So any sensation that reaches the brain has to pass through the secretary. All types of sensation must relay in the thalamus as the second order neuron before reaching the brain. So this is a golden rule you have to always remember. When we talk about the posterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus, it is the brain secretary that receives all types of sensations before reaching the brain. The posterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus relays all types of superficial and deep sensations, the lateral from the body and the medial from the face. So this is the second information you have to know about the posterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus. It is divided into two parts: the posterolateral ventral nucleus of the thalamus, receiving all types of sensations from the body, and the posteromedial ventral nucleus of the thalamus, receiving sensations from the face. The lateral posterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus, the pelvic, as we said, receives from the body, whether it's superficial sensation from the spinal lemniscus or the deep sensation from the medial lemniscus. The medial posterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus, the pemvent, the face, receives the trigeminal lemniscus from the face. And here we can see that we are talking about the lateral ventral nucleus of the thalamus. It is receiving the superficial sensation, the deep sensation from the gracile and the cuneate tracts, reaching the posterolateral ventral nucleus of the thalamus and going to the sensory area in the postcentral gyrus 312. In the face, also, the superficial sensation, pain, temperature, and touch go through the trigeminal lemniscus and reach the posteromedial ventral nucleus of the thalamus, reaching the sensory area 312. So this is for the superficial sensation from the body, from the deep sensation from the body, gracile and cuneate, the posterolateral ventral nucleus of the thalamus, the sensory area, and the deep sensation from the face, trigeminal lemniscus. Also the superficial sensation goes to trigeminal lemniscus, but in the posteromedial ventral nucleus of the thalamus, and then to the sensory area. And this is to show you the superficial sensation going to the lateral and ventral spinal thalamic tracts. Together they form what we call the spinal lemniscus, and it, as long as it is reaching from the body, it is in the posterolateral ventral nucleus of the thalamus to the sensory area, and also the superficial sensation of pain and temperature from the trigeminal ganglion, relaying the Gasserian ganglion, and then they form, forming the trigeminal lemniscus, which carries all types of sensation from the face, superficial and deep, and relaying it into the posteromedial ventral nucleus of the thalamus, which lays in the sensory area 312 in the postcentral gyrus. Thank you. I hope we'll continue, and the more you learn about circuits and combinations of the brain, the more you can understand it as one unit, and we'll see that in further lectures. Thank you very much.